All right, if everybody could just grab their seats, we'll get started. I don't know if I can. Thank you, Jack. Try to kill the music here. Although I kind of makes for a good background, right?
If we don't know what to say. If we don't know what to say.
If we don't know what to say, we'll let the music go. Great. I'll let everybody get their seats for a minute. So I'm going to introduce the panel, and then we'll get right into our topic of local store marketing. So once again, obviously you guys heard the introductions of our panelists, but right next to me is Dawn Abamondi. She's a former, well, with her husband, a former franchisee and franchise executive. She was the director of marketing for Fruit Flowers and director of operations, and then went on to own and operate a franchise. She's an experienced franchise professional. I've known her for many years. She's also served as marketing development manager and national category manager for Sunoco here in Philadelphia. And she's currently a member of the SMB franchise team, so she spends her day, doing this stuff on a day-to-day basis, advising franchisors and franchisees on marketing and implementation. So thank you, Dawn, for spending the time here. Next to Dawn is Heidi Rose. She's currently the Chief Marketing Officer of Brain Balance Achievement Centers and a member of multiple boards in the educational arena. Prior to Brain Balance, in addition to her own marketing and consulting business, Heidi was the Chief Marketing Officer for Middlebury Interactive Languages and Senior Vice President of Marketing for New Horizons Computer Learning Centers. Her franchising experience started with Nutrisystem as Vice President of National Advertising and then as Vice President of Marketing for Sylvan Learning Centers. So if it has to do with franchising or marketing, Heidi knows, she not only knows all the plays, she's written some of the playbooks. David Lapps. David spent his career working with IFA Hall of Fame member Tony Martino and Mako for close to 40 years, serving in a variety of executive positions, including franchise development, corporate sales, marketing, and operations, and then obviously at the end as president. And behind every legendary icon like Tony Martino, there of course is a legendary business leader that makes things happen. And David led the company to a successful expansion of the Mako brand, incorporating heavier collision and insurance, paid repair, dealing with expansion, franchisees, and the myriad of issues that all of us in this room deal with on a day-to-day basis. He was named president in January of 2008 and served until his retirement in January of 2013, and we dragged him from the shore to be with us here today. He and his wife Eileen, who also served as Mako's VP of Marketing, they maintain a small franchise marketing consulting company, and obviously we're honored that you've graciously donated your time to be here today. So, as everybody knows, the format of what we do here, we just want to keep it open and ask questions. So please, I encourage people here to make it interactive. We had to think of a great topic, right, after the 4th of July, to not have only 10 people in the room, but obviously I don't think it was the topic. I think it was more the speakers that were the draw. So very happy with the attendance. So we'll start off. I mean, we were talking a little bit about marketing yesterday on a phone that we do there, and one of the things that I think is interesting is what has changed, and that was a topic that we all. So I'll just kind of throw this out to the group. I don't know if Dave, you want to start. We were talking about that, is what's different today, what works better today than it used to work, and then on the flip side of that, what worked 20, 30 years ago that really still does work today.
Well, in my perspective is that customers have changed. Again, I started in this business almost 40 years ago, and customers were not that savvy. In a lot of cases, there wasn't that place to get information as to what their options were, what their choices were, where the value lied, where it would lie. Today, there's lots of opportunity to get, especially the internet. Clearly, that's what they use to do that, and that creates some challenges on the sales side, but also creates some great opportunities to position yourselves, and we've taken advantage of that. So, I find that what happens today is that as customers come in a lot of respects, the sale is a lot easier because all you have to do is you have to make sure you position them for what's important to them. That doesn't mean that they're right, by the way. Because what happens is you've got to be able to spend the time with the customer to identify what they really need, and then be able to take what they know and move them over in new directions. But I find that's a significant difference today. What works today that continues to work, that would work when I started, aggressive promotion. We were talking earlier. I had the pleasure of taking over the leadership of the company when the recession hit. two things happened at that time. One is we were owned by a single entrepreneur, Tony Martino, and upon his death, what happens is we were purchased by a private equity group, and all of a sudden now it's a corporate environment, and they're very concerned about what the bottom line looks like. I can tell you that we had been through minor recessions, nothing like what we had been through then, but we've been through minor recessions before, and Tony's had the long view, always had the long view, and we'll come through this, tighten this down. It wasn't that big a deal. This was a big deal, and so I had that pleasure of working through that. And what I found is that we had the ability to pull through that by being more aggressive than we had ever been. Not only with the dollars that we spent on advertising, but the offers that we made to the retail public. And what we found is, like I think most businesses, our customer counts grew tremendously. Probably during that period of time, 10 to 12%, but our ticket dropped 20 to 25%. So that obviously created a real challenge. And a big chunk of our business is also the B2B business, and we really took a kick in the teeth there. And what we did is we expanded we have a national sales group that develops relationships with national companies and then ferrets it down to our local franchisees. We tripled the size of that group, got significantly more aggressive, and we came through that. After one bad year, we've had good years since then. So.
Heidi, how about you going through the recession? That's a good place to kind of pick up.
I was trying to think that maybe there's like the 2008 time period, and then there's the rest of all time in marketing, because I think that we all got very, very creative at that time.
And nobody blamed marketing, right?
Yeah, well, no, marketing is never in trouble for anything. But I was actually with New Horizons, and it was a computer training company. And so, what is the first thing that groups do is they stop training individuals because they're laying them off or firing them or whatever. So what we actually did is we got into the government, we got into B2G. And so what we started doing is working with local workforce groups, and we totally changed our sales strategy within a 6-week period and got together a new marketing program and went out and captured that local B2G money. And that was only there for a short period of time, and then we had to go find something else. But looking back at what is really the difference between marketing today and marketing 10, 20 years ago, I would say probably the biggest thing is the internet. And I remember when the internet first came onto the scene around 99, 2000, I was actually in San Francisco, and my husband had an internet company. So we kind of went through that whole thing and saw the explosion of it. So I was fortunate to be able to build websites really early on. And there was, at that point, no such thing as search engines. Google didn't even exist. And you just built a website and you were sure people were going to find it. And then so it's kind of evolved. But I think staying on top of that is really the difference between marketers today and good marketers, and because people that have not embraced the internet and don't understand search engine optimization and global and mobile and social, it's a really different world. How we divide our marketing dollar up is different, and also how our customers find it. It used to be that when you ran a radio and television ad, everyone would just go to the phone and they would pick it up. Now what they do is, if you run a radio and television ad, they'll go to the internet. So when they call up and say, well, how did you hear about us? They'll say, well, I was on the internet. And I look at my page count, how many pages, how much time they spend on through Google Analytics. And in ours is a considered purchase decision, and so it's lengthy, it's 4 minutes. And so the thing is that when we run radio and television, our internet numbers just go through the roofs, and people are saying, well, radio and television doesn't work, and that's not the case. And how do we know that? Because if you drop radio and television, the phone just doesn't ring. And so you have to be very careful.
Do you think that also, maybe that kind of goes to Dawn or everybody, that it goes to, with the internet and people are more informed and it's not just radio and television drive, does that put a little more pressure on the individual franchisee at the store level to close the deal or deal with that, or how does that change that?
I think it's always the responsibility of the location to close the deal. You can have a great franchisee in one market and the wrong franchisee in another, or the wrong operator, or the wrong person on the phone or in the store that day. So, I mean, I think always one of the things that has been important to every brand that's out there is your frontline employees. Doesn't matter how much money you can spend in marketing and advertising. I mean, my budgets at Sunoco used to be $10 million a year. I went to go work for a small gift company, and we didn't, we had less than $50,000 a year to spend for the brand. And our employees made the difference every single day.
Well, that was interesting. I mean, we were talking yesterday about marketing, and it always sort of goes back towards operations, right? I mean, Dave, you told a great story about the location, about suddenly, could you retell that story about when you would go to visit a franchisee?
One of the things that I like to do is we put a new center in and kind of get a sense of what the new center is dealing with from a marketing standpoint. And I would like to go to the market and kind of drive around, and typically I would not ask for directions, because they wanted to learn about this location, the center. And it wasn't, we happen to have, the challenge that we had at Mako is that most of our locations were not retail locations. They were light industrial. That doesn't mean we don't have them, but we were challenged with zoning for where we could put them. And so it wasn't likely I was going to drive down the main street and bang, and there was the Mako, so we had to try it. And as I would go through this process, it was not unusual that I would have to stop and ask where the local Mako was. And many times, I would find that it was a block away from where I had stopped. And it was fascinating that many times they didn't know. And the business had been there for 3 years. You know what I mean? Which meant to me that and I believe this, because most of our franchisees do not live where their store is.
Right.
All right? They're not members of that community. They come in the morning, they open the doors, they do business, and they close the doors at the end of the day, and they go home. They don't really have much to do with the community, and that's the kiss of death. Because what they do is we're putting on all the emphasis on the national marketing to drive it without having any relationships, having been established. And I believe that, and there's a lot we do in our system to overcome that. The way the opening team handled them from the very beginning. Their responsibility was that you draw first a quarter-mile circle, and what we start doing is we start visiting, and we actually train them, like if you're having lunch, one of the purposes of, is your job is to introduce yourself and tell the story, tell your story. And we would try to manage that process. That actually started in training class. The opening team did it, and then the follow-up team continued to work on that. So I think that's a very important part of it. I believe that all marketing, I don't care how big your national budget is, all marketing is local. Every bit of it's local.
It's a great takeaway. I mean, of that, of local, of knowing. I mean, you could even test that yourself. If you're a franchisee and you have a store and you think everybody knows you, go around and just ask directions. How do you get to my store? And see if they even know you're there.
And it's just, I think it's one of the franchisees logically buy a franchise for the marketing system. I get it. And that's a wise decision. But to put all the emphasis on the marketing system to do the job without any real outreach, just as, I like to think of it as when a new store opens, you should go around to the local people, the local businesses, and say, oh, okay, you've been assigned to me now. Do you know what I mean? When you have automotive body repair problems, paint problems, collision, I'm the guy who's assigned to take care of you. This is who I am. Whenever you need me, I'm ready. All right? And it's a philosophy about how you approach business, and it's not arm's length. It's very organic.
Questions? Anybody want to chime in? I could keep going and asking this. Heidi, I ask you this. Do you think you can go over? Oh, we have a question right here.
Yeah.
Sorry
So
about that.
is there a way that this concept of the 4-mile circle, is there a way that you track whether or not they're really introducing themselves, or is there?
There's a relationship manager, and what they would do is they try to set us, and the truth of the matter is I don't think we manage it that well after a quarter. But a quarter mile, there's going to be quite a few businesses and people in a quarter mile. What we would do is we would then identify targets of fleet opportunity that existed, and that would extend past that quarter to half mile. That would go on, and that would be managed better.
But there are actually some companies, some franchise organizations, I think Huntington Learning Centers does this, where they actually have to go out and put so many pamphlets out and so many posters out, and then they have to take a picture and send it back to Eileen. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's how Eileen Huntington, that's how the folklore goes. And it's really important. I mean, that whole 5 mile, 4 miles, 5 miles, that whole radius is, I hope that's, yeah. That whole 5 mile radius around the center is something that everyone should do, no matter if you're in a B2B, B2C, who your customer is, because that's really your core area where people will drive. And that's really how franchises are sold. But I do think that when I first started out working for a franchisor of pizza restaurants, and this was right when Domino's and Pizza Hut and all of the pizza wars were going
Delivery.
on. We were outspent for media $15 to $1. So for every $1 we spent, our competition spent 15. And so what we did is we went very hyper-local. We knew that we couldn't compete with radio and television. But what we did is we went out and we said, what do we have that the market wants? And that was pizza for sports teams. So sports teams, all of the little leagues, or we did everything. We did reading clubs, anything that we could come up with. Is we would just do a certificate that would allow a teacher or a coach, that really works hard and wants to give the kids something. Great game, here you go. Here's a certificate for your wall with a tear-off coupon for pizza. So it was a free 8-inch pizza. Our food cost was like 64 cents. And how we tracked it, because it always goes back to the ROI, is that they put how much the family spent when they brought that in. And so it was all like 8-something, 860, 870. And so that's a typical example of, is that worth your while? Yes.
Yeah.
Food cost 64 cents, revenue $8. And these were very much people that would have not have come before. They could have gone to any of the pizza groups. So that we called it the Good Sport Award, and it was just a way to kind of get with not your primary customer, but your influencers. And the influencers are the coaches, are the teachers, are the, it could be Bible school, it could be, there was an award for everything. We had some certificate for everything. So.
And that's something franchisees can do, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's something that you have that time. I mean, and in fact, that was one question we had about social media. We were talking a little bit about going overboard, spending too much time. It's sort of a balance, and that's something that if franchisees take their week, that's really something, that's where they should spend the majority of their time.
Right. It would be better giving Good Sport Awards than, I think that there's an industry, one of those download things that you can get on the internet, which I love. I have a whole file full of them. But they were saying for franchise owners, or anyone that does social media, that you need to spend 5 hours a week doing social media. So how many out there have 5 extra hours to do your Twitter and your Pinterest and your Facebook? I mean, it's a significant amount of time, which is why most of it falls at the national level.
Right.
And if they do, there's a problem.
Right. What are they not doing?
What are they not doing?
Right.
On the topic of outreach between, BNI groups and chamber events and LATIP groups and,
PFA events.
Here we are.
If
Yeah.
you're not careful, I mean, you could definitely spend 40 hours.
Your
a week
entire
networking. So
entire
how do
week.
you-
Yeah.
How do you
It's-
balance? Because I find myself sometimes in the,
Yeah.
where you can't track an ROI too.
In our business, because we had very strong advertising budgets. I mean, there was a big retail component that already existed. It's not like you had to spend that much time on it. Here's what I try to get people to do, because I learned this from our franchisees. This is the long march approach. We train our franchisees to make one new call a week, one, and visit one existing account a week, one. It's amazing. If you did that for 1 year, if you just had a new call once a week, now, what does that look like? It's a scheduling issue that I know that what we in our business, because it's a very production heavy, the front end of the week is really crazy getting the system started. Usually by Wednesday about 1 o'clock, you could get out and the engine's running. Everything's set up, the store's running. You could get out for an hour to 2 hours. And by the way, we'd have to manage it so well, because if they did it, if they weren't in the store, if they weren't in the store more than 2 hours, what happens is they find ways to not be in the store. And they're making calls when they're not really making calls. So we try to do is, when we're developing a franchisee, we want them in the store. That's how you learn the business, is by operating the store. But you do have to reach out, and if you could do that, manage your time over a long period of time, you'll get, the results will be good. Everyone that I saw that built powerful outside businesses, that's what it looked like. It's not like they hired people that had a rush to get out there and create all this instant business. Steady.
Slow and steady.
Yeah, I think it depends. My husband and I became franchisees of a 20-year-old franchise, and then we relocated it because we bought it. It was in South Jersey. We live in Bucks County. And I worked for the franchisor at the time. We had a full-time general manager. The one thing that happened, we bought the store in 2008. We invested a ton of money in 2009 to advertise because we were new owners, and that helped us. But 2010, the years started to hurt. And when we moved the location, and we sold that, and we bought a location in Bucks County where we lived. And for a year, I spent almost every day networking. I was telling Dave earlier, I did the breakfast, lunch, and cocktail hour circuit, and I have 3 young kids. But that was the way we took a business that was declining for 5 years, and we turned it around. And it was all B2C, right? So I'm sorry, it was all B2B. But the way our business worked is every time we got a business client, a lot of times, 1 out of 2 times, we got a private client out of that, an individual customer. And so that was valuable to me. I don't know, you have to look at your business and decide how much of your time is worth being out there. If you're constantly trying to engage new customers, that may be the good way to do it. But I wouldn't recommend doing what I did. We wanted to sell that location. We wanted to get it to a point where we could, turn it over to a new owner and have it be somewhere close to where it was when we bought it after it declined, 30% in sales in a 5-year period. And that was the only way we knew how to do it. We had spent through all of our money. We were doing the minimum that we could do from direct mail, print, online. We were doing all that. But I felt in order to get to those businesses who had fallen off in that 5-year period, I had to go back out and meet them face to face and rebuild that trust in what we were doing. And the other business owners, unfortunately, didn't have the luxury of getting out there. I had a full complement of staff who could run the business day to day. I didn't have to worry about production, delivery, answering the phone. I had people to do that. I spent my time marketing and meeting those people face to face.
And that's sort of the, you got to pick that role, and the franchisor sort of can say that too. Like, what is the role of the owner? What is the role of the franchisee? And that's one piece of it that is very difficult to delegate.
Just a quick comment.
Yeah.
Something you just said about trust, and I agree with you, because sometimes our franchisees would hire someone to do this. It was so powerful when the franchisee was the one calling on businesses. The difference was amazing.
Yeah, skin in the game. Yeah, skin in the game.
And what happened? The franchisee can do what has to be done to create a business relationship. As an employee can't necessarily do that. In our case, it would be, sometimes it said, let me take a car, no charge, I'll do it for you. You don't like it, don't pay for it, right? And an employee won't do that, because what the franchisee understands is everything revolves around creating a customer. So that's what I got to do, create a customer.
I have a question for the panel that's inviting me, and I want to take advantage of your expertise. And I noticed when we were going around in the room, there were several franchisors who were young and starting out, and they had 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And that's pretty good, and that means the growth is there for them. But then my question is, and from the marketing context, is when you do your marketing advertising, let's say TV, and then there's a little tagline that says franchises available, contact us, versus dedicated franchise marketing. Is there a difference? Is one response better than the other? Does that franchise available tag ever work?
Yes, it works. Some brands will grow from the customer base, and that works in a certain market. Once you get out of your core market, it can't work. It can't be bigger. It can't be bigger than your messaging. Your franchisees, that's not fair to them. The FDD, any attorney in the room will say that you have the contractual right to do it as a franchisor, and it should be in your FDD. If it isn't, then it was left out. But it shouldn't be the primary message, and it can work. It just doesn't. From my experience, more so with fruit flowers and that specialty retail gift industry, your core customers love their product. They love the product. They're not all going to be the best franchisees.
What would you guys say about the blended about a blended message? Yeah, maybe the worst.
You know, I actually, when it comes to broadcast, I would not.
Not
I
on
would
broadcast,
not put. I
on
would not
print.
put franchises available. Where we get more hits is just on our website, and then what we do is we have a button that then takes them to a different CRM, a different franchise page. I saw that Decorating Den is here. Decorating Den, I think, has like the best 5-page sliding landing page to get franchise owners up and in the system. I think that they did a really great job of that. You know, so I think that you have to be really careful, because not just because you want to own a business doesn't mean that you should. It's like spandex. Just because you can wear it.
I love. Heidi, I may steal that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Is there another hand up? So we were talking about also yesterday about diversity in marketing.
Yeah.
You know, about using a lot of different tools. I mean,
Integrated.
yeah.
Yeah.
So do you?
Right.
You know, how do you deal with the franchisee who maybe is very comfortable with those networking meetings, and that's all they do is deal with those networking meetings? You know, what advice can you give to a person who is kind of caught in a rut of doing only one thing?
It's not going to work.
I think it's kind of like a well-balanced diet. If you take the food pyramid or any other thing, I think it's all part of a well-balanced diet. And there isn't going to be one thing that really makes your business take off. It really is. How I look at it is almost from a 3-part series. And when I talk about marketing and marketing materials and advertising, I always look at 3 very different parts. There is the national branding, the media, something that your franchisor develops the materials, really studies what the message should be, and that's your national branding. I look at that as an umbrella. And then I also look at the mid-tier, which is your regional co-ops, the other franchise owners within your market area, which you could leverage and share dollars with on radio and television, mixed media, even going to some shows, et cetera. And then you have your individual local store marketing, which is the third. And so I really think that a part of the well-balanced diet is making sure that you are really utilizing and optimizing those 3 different levels. So the local level, the regional level, and then the national level. And that's.
Yeah.
Sounds very similar. Like, I just wanted to bring in, because it's a perfect tie-in about the, Dave, what you were saying yesterday about Tony Martino thought of it as a business as an organism, as a customer creation.
Well, yeah, people they think of marketing in a narrow band. Marketing is everything. You take a global view. I mean, Dawn, you were saying something earlier that I'm such a big believer in this. You said your staff has more to do with the effectiveness of your marketing than maybe any other variable. And what happens is, when we think of marketing as a very arm's length kind of thing, that I'll do this thing outside my business, I'll contract this station, I'll put this mailer out, I'll do this thing on the internet, as if that's going to be the thing that creates customers. It misses the point. Tony Martino's most endearing address to the chain was when he referred to to business as a customer creating, customer satisfying organism. And he used the word organism to say it's got a life. You know what I mean? It's not this kind of cold-hearted thing. It's it's very, very human. And what happens is all the things that impact on what a customer thinks about you. If we just take the advertising or these things that we traditionally call marketing, and that's all that we focus on. There was a guy, Tom Finkelstein, I think his name. I don't know if you've ever.
Yeah.
He's an IFA speaker.
Yep.
Now he came in and proposed something to us, and Tony, I've almost thrown out because, well, he proposed that we cut our advertising budget in half, which. Tony
Shocking.
was a big believer in advertising. He was a big believer that if you need more customers, you increase the advertising. Those you just. And this guy's talking about cutting the advertising. His contention was, if you're spending $22 million a year, $22 million a year on advertising, what you ought to do is spend $11 million and spend $11 million on recruiting and training. Now, the idea
Great.
is an interesting idea. His point is that
Yeah.
the quality of your staff is as important as any other thing that you do. Why would you not invest in the quality of your staff? Why wouldn't competency? Competency in the way the customer is treated when they walk in. Competency in how the product's delivered. All those issues. And I think, by the way, if it was my decision, the answer would have been no. I would have done that too. But the idea that the quality of your staff is as important as any other variable in the marketing system is crucial. And so therefore, spending time in developing competency, in hiring correctly, just a little side, intuitively in our business, when they're trying to hire someone up front, they hire a body man, someone who knows how to write an estimate, recognizes damage. But as I used to say, if smiling at customers is required, this person couldn't smile if I said, "You've got 3 seconds to smile, son." And I put a gun behind his head, he couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. It just wasn't who they were. You know what I mean? What I found is who you hire is the first thing.
Right.
Are they the right people for that job? Then how you train them, and then how you manage them, which is all training and development management. It's all part of the same thing. And so, as you begin to develop your marketing system, your local marketing system, don't let that have short shrift. That's a very crucial part of it. It is customer creating, customer satisfying. Because I tell you what, if you don't satisfy customers, then all you're going to do, we've had that situation in some cases, where you just spend more and more and more and more to drive customers in to disappoint them.
To be
too.
disappointed.
Right.
Yeah. I actually had an experience with body repair twice in the last 6 weeks.
Oh.
My husband had an accident, and then a week later, my in-laws who live with us, and we own their car, they drive our car, they take care of our children. Their car was hurt, and their, the guy at the body shop was the most engaging, complimentary, polite person. He emailed, he called, he texted, he kept us in communication. So there's a couple takeaways from that. It was the relationship that he started to develop with us, with my in-laws, who were, they're older, they were upset that they had had an accident, they were feeling bad because it was our car and my husband had been in an accident the week before. So there was all of these things that made them feel better by working with Antonio at the dealership to get the repair done, and the communication, right? He was empowered to do what he did, but he kept us, so he was allowed to use email. He was encouraged to use email, and he was encouraged to talk to us and tell us, okay, I need to get another part, it's gonna be another 2 days, and being in contact with us. And your frontline employees, whether you're a franchisor or a franchisee or you have any other business, I mean, the communication that starts from where the management is, this is our brand direction, this is where we're going, this is our strategy, it should go all the way down to every single employee and keeping them in the loop on what's happening, and empowering them to make the right decisions to make the brand move forward. I mean, we're too competitive today. People don't have a lot of money to spend. They think about it. They look at everybody else before they spend their money. And so you can't afford not to do these things. It's not all about marketing. There's so many different things that make it all work.
Well, Rita's, that was, the 4 walls marketing, so that was local store marketing.
That's it.
That's
How, yeah.
That's his message. It's interesting, you said keeping everyone in the loop. We have at Mega, we have the CSI program. We measure customer satisfaction, hold franchisees accountable for what customers are saying, and it's really fascinating. If I was really looking at strong franchisees who have a good staff, who's well motivated, and they're performers, they get their CSI scores. I don't care whether the franchisee knows what the CSI score is. I'm going to go back to the guy who's sanding the car, and I'm going to ask him what the CSI score is. And you might think, well, that's strange. Don't you think the guy who's sanding the car should care much about whether customers are satisfied as the guy up front? I mean, that's a major tell, and that's just leadership, isn't it? Just making sure everyone's tied into the vision. And so what we work hard to do is, again, there's like franchisee keeps saying we put all these more responsibilities. We created this system to manage this. So we want you to do that. Now we want you to make sure you share that with your employees. And it's just another element we have to manage to continue to make sure that that happens. So I think your point is a good point.
Questions, other questions? Yeah, I think, so with those franchisees who are, saying that, how do you get a franchisee who maybe is resistant for some of the franchisors in the room, especially maybe some of the startup franchisors in the room who are, hey, you only have a half a dozen stores or locations. How do you get the franchisee who is resistant to take on a new marketing program?
Well, what I try to do is find success and really promote that success. So you try to find someone that's doing it right and then build that story and build that case with a how-to, you can do it too. So it's very much a testimonial. This is what their sales increased. They went from this to this. These are the steps that they took. And you really take it. Because oftentimes if it's corporate coming down and saying that, and it's not so much brain balance, but certainly when we had 1,800 franchise locations at Nutrisystem, this was a big deal. And 600 locations at Sylvan. The thing is that finding someone that's doing it right and making that person the hero is important. So as a franchisor, it's having your president's panel, your club or whatever that's saying, okay, these are the 5 things that we want to have done in the markets, and then finding 5 people that have had success with that. And so it's not you saying, I'm corporate, I know best, but it's you saying, look, these are your fellow brethren that are doing this and are doing it really quite well. So that's...
I totally agree. At Sunoco, we had to first convince, the marketing department had to convince the operations team that it was going to be successful.
Never easy.
Because they get a sign kit. There were 200 pieces in the sign kit that I would send out to every franchisee and every company-operated location every month. And they're like, I don't have time to put up 200 signs. Okay, well, somebody's coming into the location to get gas. They're upset because they have to pay, at the time, $2.50 a gallon. Oh my God. And why are they going to come inside? Well, put up the signs, they'll come inside. And then once we got it to the operations side, well, then we had to go convince the franchisees because, oh, sure, it's working at the company-operated locations. They're on your payroll. You pay them to do those things. We started to put together in every single promotional calendar the communication of why the promotion was going to work, not because the customers were going to be happier or because they were going to get a free Snickers bar with a coffee, which our franchisees thought we were insane for doing that. It was one of our best promotions. We got the coffee company to buy down the product. We got Snickers, M&M Mars to buy down the product. Franchisees got free items in order to cover that cost, that margin loss. And then we showed them where we had test marketed it, how much sales increased. So gross margin, dollars increased, even if you had to lose a percentage point or 5. And so we showed them the numbers. We said, you know what, you sell this many of that unit on average, you're going to sell this much more on average, which means this much more money in your pocket. And so we did that for every single promotion. We ran a lot of promotions at a time, but they were able to look at it and say, okay, this means to me I might sell $5,000 more this month. And if it meant, because they were getting the stress from the pump, they were happy that people were coming in the door and paying more for food inside. So
the reason I think franchise marketing is more interesting than company marketing is because it does have a 2-sales process. Not only do you need to sell to the end consumer, but it's kind of fun to sell to the franchise owner. I mean, it's kind of, if you're a marketer, you should be pretty good at sales. And you have to constantly be selling your franchise owners of why they should do what you're saying. And just because you said so is not a reason.
And it's trust, right? We were talking about
Well,
that.
I think there's
Well, it's ROI. It's talking in a way that your customer franchise owner wants to hear, like what's in it for me, the WIFM, what's in it for me.
And I think there's one more element. As an organization grows, you tend to forget that there's a lot of people having contact. In our system, there was a lot of people who had contact with franchisees. And sometimes you kind of treat people as if, well, you're over here. You're never going to talk about this. You're never going to do. And we found that the more the whole company was sold to. So if you're selling to the consumer, you're selling to the franchisee, you got to sell to your own people. What you're working on, and what works, and because here's what will happen. They'll talk. In a non-related situation, they'll bring it up and they'll talk about it. So it's when you said that there's multiple audiences, I thought, I learned that there's one more audience, that sometimes we just kind of forgot, and we had to make it part of our system to constantly do that. It's important as you grow, because you tend to compartmentalize and say, this is this group, they have nothing to do with that. You know, in our system, we had people, we probably had a lot of contact with franchisees. We had a sales group that sold them paint supplies. We had an advertising group that was, they were in contact with that group 3 times a week. They were in contact with a group over here in advertising, they were in contact with a group in operations, they were in contact with a group in PR. There's all this, you know, all this thing going on all the time, and these people weren't bought into the what we were working on to get, you know, to drive sales.
You had brought up a term yesterday, Heidi, about earned media versus paid media.
Yeah, that wasn't a term I made up. That was a term.
No, you brought up. It was,
Yeah.
You might as well, because I had never heard it before.
okay,
So you
yeah,
brought it
It's
up.
all her.
Yeah. Well, I thought that it was kind of an interesting distinction because, you know, my favorite, of course, is paid media, because you get to control the message when it runs, the schedule, you have complete control. But earned media basically is much trickier and much harder, and really revolves around where your message has to be just as tight and concise as your paid media. And most people don't feel that way. Most people think that with PR, that just because, you know, you're having this big special promotion that everyone wants to hear it, and that's just not the case. And so the earned media is public relations and social media, and it would be your networking at the you know, PFA club or the Chamber of Commerce or whatever. But that's really earned media that you go out there. And the most important thing about that is that your message has to be succinct. You have to have, I was very impressed with the elevator pitches that people, when they stood up and introduced themselves. It seems like you might have been to a couple of other luncheons doing that before today, but they were all I thought they were very crafted, and that's, you know, just having that elevator pitch of what you do, then having your 1-minute speech, then having your 3-minute speech. That's really that earned media that you want to carry over into everywhere that you go.
And to some degree, that's really that's something the franchisee can control, you know, so for franchisors to be able to teach that so the franchisees can.
Yeah, a lot of franchisors right now are doing kind of the communication plans where they'll send it out to the franchise owners, and they'll have, this is the elevator pitch, this is the 1-minute pitch, this is the 2-minute pitch. And that's really helpful because, you know, it's because you may think that everyone is as good as coming up with those pitches as you are, and that's just not the case. And so to control, or not control, but to really suggest and to provide examples, everyone will take that speech and make it their own. But to provide an example is really helpful for some people that don't feel as confident with that as others.
So we're coming up on 2 o'clock, and I always promise to respect everybody's time so we get out of here. So I will, I'm going to ask one more question. Now, I know we've talked this whole time about holistic, and it's long-term, and it takes a long time to develop, and, you know, there's no magic bullet. But if there was a magic bullet, and there was one thing that people could leave here with and say, boy, this is something I can do today, or I can implement tomorrow. I'll start here and work down on each of you to say, you know, one idea. Sorry to put the pressure on you. Ask you first there, Dawn, as you look. What's one idea you think people could kind of walk away with of?
I think getting your employees to understand what the brand messaging is and what the company is all about, and giving them the empowerment to work with your customers. And even if it's making it right, I read all the time. I read a blog the other day. What is your empowerment budget for your staff? Do they have $10, you know, allowance to make it right for a customer who got a bad sandwich, had a trainer who didn't do what they were supposed to do, or you know, a windshield wiper blade broke or wasn't working or something? You know, what is the budget? And it could be, you know, high-end hotels have a $2,000 allowance for their every employee to make it right for a customer who walks through their hotels who doesn't have a good experience. At a retail location, it might be $5 a month, and they just know that they can spend that money. So it's at the staff level and giving them that control.
See, it's a good idea. Now they can't steal that one.
Yeah. Darn it. Okay. Well, when I was at Nutrisystem, and Don McCullough, there's been very many people that have owned Nutrisystem, so you have to kind of say which era you were there, because there's been so many eras. But Don McCullough was a former Pizza Hut guy, and so he was a marketer. He introduced the pan pizza. And he was new to franchising and really was very good at it. We had 1,800 locations. And what he always said is that the most important thing with franchising is to get the five keys right. And it was penetration, having enough centers within a market area so you have a brand name, location, that they're clean, bright, well attended to. Operations was that everything was running smoothly. Communications was, notice that communications is after operations. Communications is to get that word out there, earned and non-earned media. And then the last one was what they called excitation, which I think was probably the key to our success, was the fact that the culture that we created within each department at the corporate office, and also the culture that we created within each store, really made a big deal. And so if you could do anything that you're probably not thinking about, because you might be thinking about penetration, location, operations, communications, don't let that excitation, adding the fun, the culture of your store or your whole franchise, don't make sure that you do things that really nurture that. So.
Very good.
Like that.
Excellent.
I shouldn't say anything.
That's right. Ditto?
No, it's a very powerful message, I think. Unless you create that excitement, you know, nothing good happens without enthusiasm, does it?
Right.
Nothing good happens without it. I just want to go back to my sense that that local store marketing is as much about outreach as it is anything else. And you know, when I first learned the business, the #1 franchisee, #1 for a long time, I went to spend some time with him, and he told me that, and he was, well, this guy was really out there meeting people, and he said, I need you to make sure that when you're training franchisees, that you tell them they've got to join the Chamber of Commerce. And I thought, well, okay, great. He says, but that's not it. He said, they gotta go. They gotta go, you know what I mean? And they have to, because there's an opportunity, because the guy they're sitting next to, he's got a company that owns 27 vans. And the guy across the table, he's got this and he's got that. And you continue to do that, but you just did business with this guy, and now all of a sudden you've got credibility with that guy. And all of a sudden you get, so
Yep.
what I find is that if the more that we can encourage people to reach out, to establish those relationships in their local business community, and again, I have a sense of having what I thought was a fairly good national marketing system, and the over-reliance that occurred on that. And, you know, there are various franchisors here or franchisees here at different stages that you didn't have the benefit of that. But I find that can be a curse too. You know, when you have that big budget working for you, it's that sense that what I call franchisees who did this, I call them carpetbaggers. In other words, they would come in the morning, do business, leave at the end of the day, and know nobody around them. I have to establish no relationships, as if marketing is a discipline without relationships, and that doesn't make any sense to me. Marketing is about creating relationships,
Right.
and creating customers through creating strong relationships. So that's what I would recommend.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to our panel. And so have a great rest of the summer, everybody.